house was built on you. I'm safe with you. I'm gonna make it through. Rain came, wind blew. My house was built on you. I'm safe with you. I'm gonna make it through. I'm gonna make it through. 'Cause I'm standing strong on you. I'm gonna make it through. 'Cause my house is built on you. Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. Everything around me shaking. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus. 'Cause He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would He fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail.
Open your Bible to John, the 8th chapter. Pull your talk notes out if you're a note taker. If not, you ought to become one. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to start a series that'll go like probably 4 weeks in between like now and Father's Day is coming. And kind of the spark or the inspiration for this came from a number of different sources over the last number of weeks. Some sermons I listened to from a pastor who used to be out of Portland, John Comer, Sean and Josh McDowell, some of their material from the last series we went through, Doubting Your Doubts, questions that people have that, whether God, is true and Jesus is really the way to God, and is the Bible reliable, those kinds of doubts and addressing those. And some of the things that Sean and Josh McDowell had to say about just the current climate, the younger generation, their struggles, their apprehensions about faith, how many church kids are departing the faith. And also the book by Dallas Willard called The Renovation of the Heart. And in an interview with Charlie Kirk, he interviewed George Barna from the Barna Research Group, a Christian sociologist who tracks trends as sociologists can do. And and I think Charlie Kirk was hoping that he would say some things that were more positive, but he said some, just kind of alarming to see kind of the state of the world and where young people especially are in regards to their mental and spiritual well-being. And it just, it's motivated me to, in fact, here's what Barna said in that being interviewed. He said, the problem really comes down to what our worldview is. He says, for Christians, he says, we're letting the culture dictate our view of the world, our view of life. The very thing that the Apostle Paul, and we'll put it on the screen and I'll read it here for you, says in Romans 12:1. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercies. He spent 11 chapters talking about God and His plan and His goodness and life in Christ, why you are here, what really matters ultimately. And he says, in view of all of that, the mercies of God, he says, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. And we'll talk about it yet again, as we have many, many times. Everybody worships. Not all worship is good and proper and true. In fact, most of our worship isn't. And then the second verse here, he says, don't copy, and this is from the New Living Translation's paraphrase, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. Your Bible translation, English translation probably says, don't be conformed with the forms of this world. Don't be, in the J.B. Phillips paraphrase, squeezed into the world's mold, conformed with the forms, the belief systems of the world. Don't do it. He says, but rather let God transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think, by the renewing of your mind, in other English translations. And then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. And so he's saying, Barney is saying, the problem is we're just kind of asleep at the wheel, and we're just adopting the belief systems of the world, and there's consequences associated with that because we live out of what we believe to be true. And so if you're not intentional and fully awake to God and fully awake to really reflecting on your life, then your faith risks being hijacked, even if you're not aware of it, because you find yourself adopting, being conformed to the world, being squeezed into its mold, rather than your mind, your understanding, your belief systems being transformed by the God who loves you and made you and sent Christ to rescue you. And I've said this before, and you've heard it, nature abhors a vacuum, an emptiness. It seeks to fill empty spaces, are filled by something. And it's true not just in the physical universe, but in the spiritual universe as well. It's true spiritually. And all of us will worship, whether we do it mindfully and we do it intentionally. We will live for something. We will love some things. We will settle for some answers, whether we've really thought it through, whether we're even fully cognizant of it, to the three big questions that, because we are created in the image of God, you can't not ask. And we all do. Even, it doesn't matter whether you believe in God or not. That's one of the questions. One of the big three is like, is there a God? And if there is, what is he like? And you're going to come down somewhere on that, again, whether you're really mindful of it or not. Maybe you say, like many people, yeah. In fact, 68% of Americans would say they're Christians. They may not really have thought that through, but I'm American. I was born, went to church as a kid. I guess I'm Christian. And they have thoughts about God that may or may not be, in fact, largely are not consistent with the teachings of Jesus, and yet they claim to be a follower of his. So we ask the question, is there a God? And if there is a God, what is he like? And then the second question is, what's my place in the world? Who am I? Am I just a big kind of cosmic fluke accident just here with no real purpose and meaning? I mean, it's kind of an important question. The prisons are filled with people who've gotten the wrong answer to that. Who've thought that it's just all about me. It's get what you can get, man. Don't be a chump. So the answer to those two questions really matter. And then the third one is like the one we all ask, and what's the good life? What makes a life worthwhile? What am I going to do with my life? What's good and what's bad? What's good and what's evil? What's the good life? And so really these questions are really, I believe, at the heart of issues of faith, of your worldview, of your belief system. Who is God? Who am I? And what is the good life? And what we believe about that then becomes the foundation for how we interact and how we move through life, how we live out this one brief life of ours, what we think about family, what we think about, everything is based on that. What we do culturally as a society is all flows out of that, which is why Romans 12, 1 and 2 is so important. Because if you're not real intentional and you aren't mindful of God and his truth, then you're going to be conformed, squeezed into the world's mold. And so we need to be serious about being transformed by the renewing of our mind. So much hinges on it. And this time of year in between Mother's Day and Father's Day and graduations coming up, and those things I mentioned at the beginning, it just made me think, it'd be worthwhile to carve out a few weeks here in between Mom's Day and Father's Day, as parents and as a grandparents, especially, but not exclusively, to really think about this. Because this belief system, this worldview, as Barna suggested in that, and I believe him to be right, he said our worldview develops at about 15 to 18 months, years of age. That's when it really starts to develop. What kids believe to be true about God themselves and what the good life is starts pretty early. And he says that's almost formally formed by age 13, and then it can tweak the margins and, the teenage and through the 20s. And then he says by 30, you actually become an evangelist for your worldview. You seen any of the the university protests and what else do they call those, takeovers? Yeah, you become an evangelist for what you believe to be true, and that is formed early, and so we need to really take that seriously as parents. And I don't know if you know, but it's like 1/4 of those people on those campuses don't even go to the campus. They're just the agitators who kind of taking the money and setting things up. Half the kids have no reason, don't even know really why they're there. Couldn't find Israel or the Gaza on a map of the Middle East, much less the world. And then, but they want to be a part of something. They want their life to matter. They want it to count. They've been indoctrinated with a worldview, by the professors in most of our universities who are anti-God, anti-Jesus, but you can't be anti-nothing. Nature abhors a vacuum. You'll believe something. You will have some foundation that you'll build your one life on. And so, man, don't let the world squeeze you into its mold. And so it's really important. And you throw in, TikTok. Like 175 Americans are on TikTok. 30% of those are under 30. And just on average, it's an hour and a half a day spent on TikTok. And some of that's just goofy, and some of it's just indoctrination. Belief systems being pumped in. Now, if it's an hour and a half a day, what do you think and that's on average of all age groups. How much do you think that would be for younger people? You're trying to get me started like on the Disney Channel and Netflix and all that stuff, aren't you? That's what you're trying to do. Here on Mother's Day, you're trying to drag me into that, but it's not going to work. Moving along. What is it? Vladimir Lenin, the founder of the Soviet Union, of communism in Russia, a disciple of Karl Marx, he said this, put it in your talk notes, I think if he got it, how much more should we get it? Give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seeds I have sown will never be uprooted. Yeah. And he knew Marxism, which is being really taught in some degrees in our higher education and filtering down lower, is antithetical to Christianity. Marx said, religion is the opium of the people, because if you believe there's a God, then you won't believe the state then has the powers of God and the authority of God. And so he said, give me your children for 4 years, man, and I'll have them for the rest of their lives. And my goodness, if he gets it, how much more should we as parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and Jesus followers be more mindful as watchmen and women standing at the gate of the kinds of belief systems that are being pumped into the hearts and minds and souls of our children. Thinking about all this made me think, as oftentimes it works this way, of a song. Cat Stevens, that just came to my mind, songs 10-2. You know that song where I think his girl's leaving him because she thinks she can do better. She's being dumped as a boyfriend or whatever, but I'm making the application more broadly. And you know the song, he goes, but if you want to leave, take good care, hope you make a lot of nice friends out there. He said, but just remember, there's a lot of bad, and beware. Oh, baby, baby, it's a wild world, and it's hard to get by with just a smile. And he's right. There is a lot of bad out there, and that's why we want to focus in the next 4 weeks on this. But it isn't just out there. It's in here. It's in me as well. It's in my soul. And I don't think there's any of us, whether you're a Jesus follower now or not, can't identify with this inner tug of war that goes on inside of us between good and evil and wise and foolish. And the teachers of Jesus through the millennia have used this phrase of the world, the flesh, and the devil to kind of identify the enemies of our own soul. Those words aren't all lined up in the Bible like that, but it's taught all through the scripture that there's this battle that we're all a part of. Like it or not, recognize it or not, a war against the world, the flesh, our own self. We'll get into that next time, and the devil. And so on the docket will be, for the next few weeks, we're just going to explore Jesus' teaching on the world, the flesh, and the devil, as well as other Bible teachers also. So, and in doing so, our goal is to unmask some of the tactics of the enemy of our soul and his strategies so that we might, when we get near to the end of our life here, be able to say with the Apostle Paul that I fought the good fight of faith. Yeah, big deal. And so our agenda will be, and I put this in your talk notes again because I think it's just good to have this in mind, especially over the course of the next few weeks, especially over the course of the rest of your life. A quote that's attributed to this military strategist named Sun Tzu, and it goes like this: if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will suffer a defeat. And then he says, if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. And it's true. And so that's why we want to talk about the world, the flesh, and the devil, because these are our enemies, and one of those enemies is in our own mirror. And so I thought since it's Mother's Day, we would start with the devil. What do you say? We better rock and roll. Holy cow. You guys waste my time every Sunday. I'm seeing a pattern. Okay, so John 8, let's start there because Jesus is going to address some things about the devil that we would do well to be mindful of. And so we'll begin in verse 31 where it says, to the Jews who had believed in him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples, my apprentices. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. You know, the truth will set you free is a phrase, one of the most commonly known of Jesus' phrase. It's taken out of context, for sure. Verse 33, it says, they answered him, we are Abraham's descendants. These are the religious leaders, the thought leaders of ancient Israel here that he's addressing. And they answer and they say, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves to anyone. I guess they forgot about the whole story of Moses and Pharaoh. How can you say that we shall be set free? And Jesus replied, very truly, I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. And we'll get into that in a couple of weeks. Now, a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I know that you are Abraham's descendants, yet you are looking for a way to kill me because you have no room for my word, which is truth. No room for truth These are the religious leaders. He says, I'm telling you what I've seen in the Father's presence, and you are doing what you have heard from your father. I wonder who he thinks that their father is. Abraham is our father, they answered. If you were Abraham's children, Jesus said, then you would do what Abraham did. As it is, you are looking for a way to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. Abraham did no such things. You are doing, verse 41, the work of your own father. I wonder who their father is. Maybe we'll find out if we keep reading, so let's. We are not illegitimate children, they protested. The only father we have is God himself. Now, you can miss this, but there's an innuendo here that you don't want to miss. He says, we are not illegitimate children, they protest. Now, the English translators got kind of chickened out on this because that's not what the original Greek says. It's the Greek word porneia, which means like fornication, sexual immorality, illicit sex, sex against the laws of God. He says, we're not. You know what it would be? It would be because, Jesus, he was born under questionable circumstances if you don't factor God into it. And they're throwing that into his face. And it would be more accurately translated, we are not a bastard son like you. In verse 42, Jesus said to them, he says, if God were your father, you would love me, for I have come from God. I have not come from my own. God sent me. I've not come on my own. And then verse 43, why is my language not clear to you? Because you were unable to hear what I say. He says, you belong to your father. Well, who is the father? He says, you belong to your father, the devil. Now, that illegitimate, we're not illegitimate like you, isn't the only really insult in this section here. It's not the only slight. In fact, these Hebrew religious scholars, they would have known that Jesus was tying them back to Genesis 3, where the curse on, where Adam and Eve sinned. We'll get into that next week. And there's this prophecy that the woman's offspring, her seed, would crush the seed of the serpent's head. And he's tying these people back to that prophecy. In other words, saying their father goes all the way back to the serpent in Genesis 3. Touche, illegitimate son. Try this one. And so verse 44, he says, you belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He is murdered from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there's no truth in him. And when he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Yet because I tell you the truth, you do not believe me. And the chapter will go on with them trying to kill Jesus and up in the ante on the accusations, calling him a demon-possessed, half-hated, half-breed Samaritan. And so here it is, the end of this chapter, a chapter about the devil, a murderer from the beginning, the father of lies, whose native language is the lie. And so I just want to say to all you moms, happy Mother's Day. Let's continue. My wife last night, when I just even had some notes for her to read over, to proofread, and she goes, you're going to give out a handout on Mother's Day? I go, oh, it's going to be way worse than that. We're in a war, and you can't. It's not time to throw a picnic. It's time, to be about the Father's business. And so let's note a couple of things that Jesus here says about the devil that will serve us well as individuals. This isn't just about parenting, but as individual and as parents and as a married couple, as an apprentice of Jesus. And Jesus, his take on the devil, number one in your talk notes, is that the devil's real. There is a real devil. The Greek word he uses is diabolos, and we get our word diabolical from it. It means literally like the slanderer or the accuser. That's what that word devil means. And it's only one of many names used of Satan, which is one of the names. The evil one, the tempter, the destroyer, the deceiver, the serpent of old. And it's interesting to note that none of the names, even the name Satan, which we think is like a proper name for the devil, none of them really are. They're used as adjectives of not a proper name. It's almost, in fact, some scholars suggest that it's almost as if the writers of the scripture in Jesus, kind of a little slight on the devil, where you're not even going to get a name. But this is just the kind of being that you are. Jesus 3 times will say about him that he's the ruler of this world. And what he doesn't call him is a myth. What he doesn't call him is some sort of pre-scientific age superstitious thing or some sort of red-clad, horned, pitchfork-carrying cartoon caricature at all. To him, he would say, man, he's the God of this world. He's the invisible, real intelligence behind so much of the evil and brokenness in our world. And he's saying to these religious people, you think you're in line with the truth. You think you're in line with the father of the faith, Abraham. You think that you're in with God, that you've got it together. And he says, man, here is God in the flesh standing right in front of you. And you're embracing your lies over the truth. And really, he says that the truth be known is you're really following the devil. You're aligned with the devil, the enemy of your soul, the arch enemy of God, the ruler of this world, the one responsible for so much darkness and hatred and pain. And so it may be that you're only in church today because it's Mother's Day, and you said, hey, Mom, what do you want for Mother's Day? And she said, hey, would you come to church with me? And so maybe you're skeptical about all this. I would just ask, especially if you're going to come back, just keep your mind open. Because Jesus actually believed that the enemy of your soul, the devil, is real. And that there's real evil afoot. It's been kind of interesting to see even people who are pretty staunch atheists and skeptics in the popular media beginning to acknowledge that, man, there's just some things are just evil. That's relatively new in these recent decades. Anyone remember when Ronald Reagan talked about the axis of evil or the evil empire? It was a scandal. You can't say evil. You can't call Iran or North Korea evil. Well, I guess if you're a materialist, a Darwinian survival of the fittest, red tooth and claw, I guess there's no right or wrong. You're just a big cosmic accident. And I suppose that's true. Or postmodern, where you think, well, all truth is relative or whatever. But man, even those people who believe that nonsense are thinking, man, I don't know. Just seems like some things are really not right. Not just I don't like them, not just I prefer something different, but man, there's something wrong, something evil about human trafficking and pedophilia and all the violence and the killing of unborn babies. I mean, in my lifetime, it went from, this isn't really legal to do to, well, in the case of, rape or incest or save the life of the mother, to Bill Clinton's, how did he say it? Safe and legal and rare, to up to 9 months birthday, to celebrate your abortion with placards and posts. Man, it's just something's afoot here. And even skeptics like, the guy with the most popular podcast in all of the universe, Rogan, whatever, I can't think of his first name, but Joe Rogan, he's saying, man, this is evil. And he better be careful, because if there's evil, there can be good and not evil, but there can't be evil and not good, not some standard. And if he's not careful, he's going to end up, becoming a Christ follower. Secondly, Jesus says here in your talk notes, the devil has an agenda, and his agenda is to destroy, to murder, to kill. He's a murderer from the beginning, verse 44. A couple chapters, further in the book, John 10:10 says, And here's another title that Jesus would give the devil, the thief. He comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Because this real being is hell-bent on destruction. He has a malevolent intent, which is so ironic when you look at many of these popular music artists and others who just portray all this darkness on stage and celebrate it as if there's just not like their own soul at stake. And he's just hell-bent on tearing down. That's just what he does. C.S. Lewis said this: there's no neutral ground in the universe. Every split second of time and square centimeter of space is claimed by God and counterclaimed by Satan. And all this to say, this is not to say, hey, man, life is terrible and I hope I bummed you out on Mother's Day and you ought to live your life in fear and paranoia. I am not saying that at all. In fact, we know the verse around here about Peter saying that the enemy's like a lion looking for someone to devour. But look at how he starts that section. In verse 7, he says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. He's talking about on Jesus, on God. He says, and be alert and sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking for someone to devour, but you resist him standing firm in the faith. He says, don't worry about it. Don't live your life in paranoia and fear. Don't be anxious. He starts with that. Don't be anxious about anything. John will write in 1 John, I put these references in there, God's greater than Satan. And he says, if greater is the one that is in you as a Jesus follower than the God of this world. So we're not living in fear. We're not. In fact, Paul will write to Timothy, a reference in your notes, 2 Timothy 1:7. He says, God hasn't given us the spirit of fear. You don't need to fear. But you don't need to be oblivious either. You don't need to be obsessed and you don't need to be oblivious. And I put a quote at the end of your talk notes by C.S. Lewis that talks about the devil would love either one of those. You live in fear and paranoia and obsession, looking behind a devil behind every bush, or you're going to be someone who just, your eyes closed, being squeezed into the world's mold. And so here we are, apprentices of Jesus, and we've been born in. If you were looking for a playground, you chose the wrong planet. In many ways, it really is a war zone. And as apprentices of him, we're called to join in the heavenly invasion into the darkness of this world and to be transformed. Ephesians 6 says, man, put on the full armor of God that you can stand against your enemy. And your enemy isn't a mythology. Your enemy isn't some ideology. Your enemy is a father of lies that sows those ideologies and those lies. And then lastly here he says, Jesus basically is pointing out his primary tactic then are lies. And that the origin of all untruth can be traced back to the devil, the father of lies. It's his native language. Can any of you parents remember? I remember the shock, but I don't remember exactly what the lie was when our precious little angel, voiced the first non-truth, and it's like I was just so shocked. I was thinking like, I had higher hopes for you. And it's like, you're just like your mother. But don't you remember that as a young parent? I mean, you have this beautiful, perfect little child, and then you get like, whoa. They turns out that they have flesh, a sin nature. We'll get into that. My perfect little angel. And yeah, okay, I'll keep rolling here because you have Mother's Day plans, do you? Okay, well, I'm gonna try to help you out here by talking. Do what? Is Phil? What do we? Oh, what? Yeah, will you take that watch from him? Unfortunately, many of us, when it comes to fighting this battle, or in the parlance of the more charismatic tradition, spiritual warfare, we tend to think of it as either like I'd alluded to earlier, either sort of demonstrative depictions of Satanism like is happening commonly nowadays in popular media, like with Lil Nas X. Lil Nas X, you familiar with Lil Nas X? No? Oh, good for you. You're better for it. But he put out a tennis shoe that has like real blood, dedicated to Satan with real blood in the sole of the shoe. Or sweet little Katy Perry's Witch's Coven performance, or Billie Eilish and her All Good Girls Go to Hell. Because even God herself has enemies, and she'll want the devil on her team. And it's all a part of their show, all a part of what they're selling to kids. And so we can tend to think of it just in those terms, or maybe even worse yet, maybe just the lighthearted brush off, like the show I watched as a kid, Flip Wilson, his tagline was "The devil made me do it." And it's just, lighthearted, kind of a Saturday Night Live portrayal of the devil is nothing to be really taken seriously. Or maybe even worse, some of that Christian paranoia that I've experienced through the years, sort of this superstitious, the devil's behind every bush, the devil's behind everything. And it's like, Pastor, the devil's really been after me. And I go, what's been going on? He goes, man, I got a flat tire on the way to Bible study. Devil didn't want me to go to Bible study. I go, well, what happened? He goes, well, I ran over something. I go, did the devil put that there? I don't know. You ran over something? I go, well, if you run over stuff, you can get flats. And he goes, well, it ain't just that, Pastor. Somebody took my Amazon package off the porch, and I know that the devil's after me. And I think, no, he's already got you. Okay, never mind. Or maybe the more dramatic exorcisms like deliverances we see in the gospel when Jesus delivers someone who's being tormented by the devil. But the most in-depth passage where Jesus taught on the devil is the one we just read. And it's really a rational dispute with religious leaders about truth and lies, believing truth and lies. He says, man, the devil is real, and his agenda is to destroy, and his primary MO is to get you to believe things that are not true, because what you believe will work its way out into your life. And in Colossians 2:11, it says, the apostle tells this church, man, don't be ignorant. We're not ignorant to the devil's schemes. The devil's a liar. The devil is up to no good. He wants you to believe things and act on things that aren't in keeping with reality. And that's why I love these two definitions I put in there. It's an answer to the 2,000-year-old question of Pilate to Jesus, what is truth? And he doesn't stick around for the answer. Maybe he didn't want to hear the answer. But the best definitions I know of, one is attributed to John Locke, which is truth is that which corresponds to reality. Good definition. C.S. Lewis says, truth is that which you run into when you're wrong. It's like, you ever run out of gas? My wife lives with paranoia that, because, I want to if I get a discount at the Safeway gas station, I want as much of that discount as I can get in that tank. And she goes, well, the light's on. And I go, yeah, but I think I can make it. And she goes, well, you're going by yourself. And you know what? Secretly, not so secretly, she hopes I run out of gas. You know why? Because she believes in the cliches. What he needs is a good dose of reality. He needs the chickens to come home to roost. Yeah, and we've got a dozen of them. He got smacked with a cold, hard truth. You made your bed, now lie in it. So that's a great definition. Truth is what you run into when you're wrong. Run into what doesn't correspond to reality. And it's like a GPS, sort of. Not the GPS I was following a number of Thanksgivings ago, and I can't remember who I drove there with, but I was given the assignment of taking one of these Christmas baskets out to someone who lived on the Calapooya River someplace, and we're following this GPS thing, and it's taken us beyond where there's any homes, and there's not many, to now it's gravel. And then it says, oh, it's right here. And then it said it's right to your right. And right to our right was the river. And so we didn't deliver it there because we figured we were getting bad information, that guidance systems didn't correspond with reality. And that's the way it is with whether you call it a worldview or whether you call it like the postmodern, the meta-narrative. Maybe you've heard people say that, or as Christians, we talk about our faith, our confidence and trust we put into what Jesus says is real and true. Or psychology uses the term mental maps. They're real. We have those, and they guide us. And all of us have them. And if they are off, you're going to get lost. And if they're not in keeping with reality, you'll come smack dab into the face of reality when you're wrong. So, Dallard Willard says we live at the mercy of our ideas. And that's what we want to talk about starting next week, because it's Mother's Day and the worship team's coming up. And I think the truth is that, if we were really to think about our lives, there's probably more of that GPS guidance system that we're living by that is more off center than on. And the invitation of the God who loves us is to switch it out for a whole different, rather than a global world guidance system or positioning system, a gospel positioning system, one that centers around the truth of God. And we're going to explore that and how the enemy twists the truth to get us to believe and live by lies. Next week we'll jump into Genesis 3. But the invitation of the God who loves us, when when Marcy and I have been out driving around and we're just so not with it. And we're using the phone, and it's like, which way do we turn? If the lady's not speaking to us, we don't know which that area is. Like and so we're out trying to find something, but I figured this out. I want an English lady. If I wanted an American voice bossing me around, I already got that. So it's easier to swallow when she goes, recalculating. To go, well, thank you. That's what my wife needs to start saying. Recalculating. And why did I go there? I know why. Because that's called repentance. And the gospel calls us to repentance, to recalculate, and to turn around, and to not allow the world to squeeze us into its mold. Because there's a very real enemy, and his agenda is destruction. And his primary tactic is to get us to believe that which is not so. And he's very stealthy about it. So we want to unmask some of that so that we might live our lives responding to the invitation of Jesus in Matthew 11. And we will end with this, and I'll pray. Where he says to all of us who have been following a global positioning system that isn't true, he says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. And that's what will happen when you come smack dab into reality. It's contrary to what God made to be so. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And take my yoke upon you and learn of me. Because I'm not going to say, hey, you idiot, what were you thinking? Instead, I'm going to say, I'm gentle and humble of heart. And if you'll turn to me, my gospel positioning system, you'll find rest for your soul. The answer to those three big questions that all of us live out of. And he says, my GPS is easy, and my burden is light. So, Father, thank you for moms. Thank you for this day. Thank you for Father's Day. Thank you for all of those days in between where we have an opportunity to reorient our lives around what is true and eternal and right, and leads us into flourishing in the with God life and away from everything that the enemy, the liar, the enemy of our soul wants to confuse us with. God, I pray as parents and grandparents that you would help us to have really a heart for you that expresses itself in what we say and do and how we treat people, and especially our children, in the direction in which we point them. God, thank you that we don't need to be paranoid, but we don't need to be and can't afford to be oblivious. Help us to be sober of mind and alert and about the kingdom business, we pray. In Christ's name.
When all I see is the battle, you see my victory. When all I see is the mountain, you see a mountain moved. And as I walk through the shadows, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. So when I fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me? For Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. When all I see is a cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows.